Teachers Talk Radio. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, EduFolk. Welcome to Teachers Talk Radio. It's me, Lucy Newberger, back with you. I feel like I've had a bit of a hiatus in terms of shows, but I am delighted to be back and to be chatting about, or discussing rather, I think I should say, with this topic about school trips, which we will come on to in a moment because there is plenty to discuss and plenty to talk about. But it's always nice to do a little bit of a catch up first and check in with all of you and see how you're all doing. We are rapidly heading towards the end of the academic year. Some of us are closer to it than others. I finish on the 5th of July over here in Portugal. My sort of excuse for this, if you like, is that we didn't get a half term, but I suppose it's also one of those perks to being in the international system. But we are all currently in the depths of report writing hell, and I think from what I've seen on Twitter or X, a lot of us are in the same boat. We all as a staff have to proofread each other's, which is interesting because I kind of got to the end of mine, got terribly excited and haven't looked at them since. So I'm very much relying on my co-teacher to be a far better proofreader than I am. So we're getting to that. And of course, it's the time of year where all kinds of events are happening, things like Sports Day. And of course, what we are talking about this evening, or at least in part, the end of year trips or school trips in general. I'm off on year 4 camp in a couple of weeks. I've led year 5 camps in the past, and seeing this conversation about behaviour and its impact on school trips and whether as a result children should go or not has certainly taken Twitter or X by storm. And it's there's always something that comes up, I find, on Edu Twitter or on Edu X, whether it's Pengate, whether it's Whiteboard Gate, whether it's there's something. And I know that my two guests this evening, they both actually sit on opposite sides of the fence on this, but I'm sad to say, and this does bear talking about as part of my sort of introduction before we move on to the kind of sort of nuts and bolts of this show. Both these guests this evening have experienced comments that are at best quite disturbing and at worst absolutely vile. And it's important that we as educators, and it's hard to say this without coming across as condescending and coming across as sort of, well, yes, Lucy, we know this, and the people listening into Teachers Talk Radio are people who do engage in healthy debate and do partake in conversations, or certainly people I can see in this evening, some regulars, some new faces. But it does sort of bear repeating that, we are all professionals here. We're all people who are working in education or around education, and therefore should be able to engage in debate or discussion on social media platforms or in the wider world without resorting to absolute buffoonery, if I'm honest. And I think that we all know and understand that. And I know that, again, both my guests have acknowledged each other on Twitter or on X and said, that they're looking forward to speaking to each other and having a robust and healthy discussion. And I think that's really, really important as well. And of course, for me to be able to facilitate this evening, it's absolutely fantastic. And I think it's important that we get to do this and acknowledge why we're doing this. So, as I said, I'm off on camp myself. There are a lot of us who, whether we like it or not, in some cases, I know that there's been discussion at my school about, should we have to go on these camps and these trips? Should we get paid extra for doing it? Should we get days in lieu? And I know some schools do do offer this and do this. And I have I've had co-teachers and things in the past who have not gone for childcare reasons, legitimate reasons. And I've sometimes felt as sort of and this is going to be kind of a tiny violin moment, but I've sometimes felt, well, as a sort of single person, I don't have an excuse not to go. But I'm also one of those people whose inner big kid absolutely loves going on camps and on trips. And has also been sent on trips in the past with year groups and classes that are not my own because other teachers have refused to go. I had a brilliant story. This is kind of in my what was my NQT year, is obviously now an ECT year, where I was approached by a head teacher saying, she said to me, 2 out of the 3 year 6 teachers have refused to go. So you like mud and things like that. And I sort of, in my head, I thought, well, are you asking me or are you telling me? And no, she was very much telling me that I was off I was, and to pack my my wellies and deal with it. But on a more serious note, being responsible, I mean, of course, being responsible in class on a daily basis is a big deal, but it becomes a whole different kettle of fish, if you like, when you are taking children out into the wider world, wherever that may be, whether it's a park down the road, whether it's on overnight trips. There's an enormous amount that goes into this, from the planning, from the safeguarding point of view. Often there is a financial aspect, and it's a huge amount, and it's a huge responsibility. And of course, we all know that school trips, and actually I went down a bit of a research rabbit hole, as I invariably do when I do shows like this, just to kind of see what sort of information was out there about sort of school trips. And it's kind of all things we already know, things like they enhance children's learning. It's a change of scene. It can bring certain things to life. Access to new places, new experiences, supporting of well-being, supporting of mental health, all these things that we are all acutely aware of. And, it's important that, while it might not be some teachers' favourite pastime, or they might sort of have concerns about it, it is, one of those great things that we, in many ways, get to do. But of course, there are pitfalls, and there are situations where teachers don't feel comfortable, or teachers might not feel that they should take certain children because it compromises their safety, or it compromises other children's safety. And this is kind of what I want to get into a bit more this evening, and sort of see where both my guests, who I will introduce to you in a moment, well, in fact, I'm going to get them to introduce themselves, to share their thoughts on this, and kind of where they sit on this, and why they take the views that they do. And of course, there are a lot of you in here this evening. I can see quite a few have joined in already. And if you would like to share your thoughts as well, you can request to speak. There is a mic button at the bottom left of your screens that you should be able to see. And of course, you can tweet along as well. And once again, I would encourage you to please, by all means, share your thoughts, but do try and, I don't think I need to say this, but do try and keep it civil, please, because we don't want to cause mutiny this evening. So without further ado, let's get our 2 guests on and ready. I can see, Naomi, that you're there and ready to go. Good evening to you.
Am I? Hello. Yes, I am. Hello. Nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Lucy.
Thank you for coming back. I know you have been a guest of ours before, but for those of us who aren't aware of who you are, Naomi, could you just give a brief introduction to who you are?
Yes. So I'm a clinical psychologist, which means I'm not a teacher. I'm not an educational psychologist. A clinical psychologist is someone who specialises in mental health and behaviour. And I work with children and families, and I particularly work with children and families where the children are struggling at school, either not attending or having a really difficult time. So I sometimes, I obviously I have had some difficult interactions on Twitter. And people often say to me, you're not a teacher, you don't have any right to talk about these things. And I actually, one of the reasons I started talking about these things was because I felt that as a clinical psychologist, I was hearing a lot about what was going on in schools, but nobody was asking us for feedback. There was no way to feed back the information that not just me, lots of other clinical psychologists were hearing back to the school system and say, do you know that actually we've got a lot of kids who are very anxious about this thing that we're hearing about in your school? There's no feedback loop. There's no kind of, and I felt that was really wrong, that there was no feedback from health, which is where I'm situated, back to education, because with children in particular, it's all so integrated. It's all so, health and education, they're so much part of children's development and children growing up. So that's why I started speaking out about what I hear about and what children and their parents tell me.
And I think it's also important, and we talk about this a lot on Teachers Talk Radio, to have multiple perspectives, because whilst we, the vast majority of us are teachers, it's important to have insights from elsewhere. And sometimes it does feel a bit like we can be a little bit of an inward-facing profession, maybe sometimes. So I think it's lovely to have you on board this evening, Naomi, and I appreciate you coming back to us.
Thank you.
Nathan, good evening to you. Are you there?
I am here, Lucy.
We've actually got two Nathans this evening. We've got our lovely Teachers Talk Radio Nathan, and we've got you, Nathan Burns. So I'm going to have to be specific in who I'm speaking to. But Nathan Burns, would you please introduce yourself?
Of course. Well, I think, firstly, thank you for having me on tonight. I think it's fantastic for after this debate really sort of exploded over X over the weekend, actually, us getting to come here tonight and we can be more nuanced. We can get into more details tonight. It's going to be a really good opportunity to really get into depth in this debate and really sort of clarify some things. But yeah, a little bit more on me. So a former head of maths, so trained as a maths teacher, taught across a number of sort of East Midlands schools. Previously had roles in pastoral as well, so as a form tutor, as assistant head of Key Stage, and then I've been involved in a lot of trips as well. So it was a somewhat unofficial role, but due to sort of different responsibilities I had in a previous school, I ended up taking on a lot of trips. I was a sort of go-to guy for organising trips, sorting out trips, so quite a lot of experience in that area we're going to be talking about a lot tonight.
Fantastic. And then finally, we have got, and I will let Nathan Ginn unmute himself. He's here with me sort of to offer bits and pieces. So just remind the listeners, Nathan, who you are.
Hi. So I'm Nathan, and I work in alternative provisions in mainstream settings mainly. And I was on a trip today. I was on a trip yesterday. In fact, that's a large part of what I do is taking young people who struggle with education out on educational trips.
Fantastic. Thank you all. Okay, so to start this off, because there's many facets to this evening, and I'm sure we will go off on tangents, we'll go round about the place, and we'll have lots to say on this. But this whole school trips debate has has multiple parts to it, but we've talked about, or I've kind of mentioned why these trips are important, why they're great and all the rest of it, and then sort of touched on why sometimes they can be problematic. And there's sort of two elements to why children are perhaps maybe getting excluded from these trips. And I know that the majority of this is going to focus on the behaviour aspect. But I just want to touch on the attendance thing for the moment, because it seems in some cases, and I don't actually know how much this is happening, I wasn't really able to find any kind of concrete statistics on this, and I don't know if anybody listening can help me out here. But, and I'm fairly sure I know what, I don't know what my guests' opinions are on this, but from an attendance point of view, should that in any way, and this is, I suppose, a broad question, should that in any way impact a child's chances, just from the attendance point of view? Because I know attendance, again, is an interesting one, because attendance can be due to illness, due to a number of things, but attendance also can be behaviour related. But if we're just taking attendance as kind of as a thing by itself, should that, yes or no, or it's probably not a yes or no answer, be the reason that children are excluded from end of year trips? Should the percentage of time they've been in school be any factor in the reason that they're not allowed to attend end of year trips? Naomi, I'm going to come to you first on this one.
No, I don't think it should be. And that's informed because I hear about a lot of parents who tell me that their children have had a really hard year. Maybe they've lost a parent or they've been very ill, and then they end up with a very low attendance at the end of the year, and they end up effectively being reminded of what a difficult year it's been by then being excluded from the end of year celebrations.
Absolutely. And Nathan Burns, your thoughts on this? Just attendance, taking it as a kind of standalone thing. I know I'm kind of being grossly simplistic in a way here, but in your mind, should attendance have any factor in this whatsoever?
There is only one aspect of attendance, I think, that really could have a big impact, and that's where we've got students truanting purposefully, turning up late for school purposefully, sort of, hanging around in the park rather than going through the school gates. If students are showing those types of behaviour, then I think those are reasonable grounds for a student not to go on a trip. But in terms of what Naomi said, in terms of, if a student has lost a parent or they've been really ill, I think there are a lot of very, very genuine reasons why attendance can be lower. And I think the vast majority of the time, that's not going to be a factor that stops a student going out on a trip, especially because, if a student has low attendance, that doesn't make them a risk on the trip. And I think we maybe need to be more nuanced in terms of what the trip is for. If it's a curriculum-based trip, then I think, attendance is even less of an issue. If it's a rewards-based trip, and I'm sure we'll get into more details on this, but if it's a rewards-based trip, attendance probably has a slightly bigger impact. But I think really, if a kid is truanting, that's going to have a big impact. But otherwise, I don't think attendance will play a massive factor.
No, and it's interesting because I know a lot of schools are starting to scrap things like attendance awards. I mean, I've definitely been in schools where those have still existed, or rewards based on attendance. And we know it's a problem at the moment. We know certainly in the wake of COVID that certainly we touched on this on Weekly Review at the weekend, where we were talking about, since COVID, a lot more children are being homeschooled and things like that. So, it's certainly a different landscape from an educational point of view. Now, kind of coming on to the nuts and bolts of this, and what we're really here to talk about is kind of is the behavior side of things. And again, behavior is a big word. It's a big word, not just in education. It's a big word generally. And I'm very, very acutely aware that Naomi is, as a psychologist, is listening to me, and I mean, it's such a difficult thing to define, to explain, to discuss. I mean, there's so many different aspects to it, and we all work in different settings, different environments. I mean, just taking my example, I would say that generally in my school, behaviour is pretty good, but I have definitely had situations where, and I'm going to wear my terrible teacher hat for a moment here, where it's come to the time of year, and I don't know if any other teachers do this, where I'm starting to sort of use camp as a bit of a sort of, oh, well, you need to behave because, camp's coming up, you need to make sure that, that you go. I know, and I think they know, although maybe I'm wrong, that I'm going to take them all, and that, we're going to have a blast and it's going to be a great time, because there's absolutely no reason for me not to. Now, maybe even there, I'm being a bit naughty, and I don't know. And again, my guests can kind of give their thoughts on this, but it's kind of, I suppose what I'm trying to say is, am I incentivizing them, or am I just kind of being a bit of a meanie and kind of sort of saying, oh, well, I should be using something else to motivate and to kind of keep them going for these last few weeks. I don't know. Am I being terrible? I suppose it's a bit of a self-indulgent question, that one.
Is that to me? You've been terrible.
You could judge away. You can leap in first and tell me that I am now in negative teacher points here.
I absolutely wouldn't, and I don't. The job of being a teacher is extremely difficult, and I have every respect for people who manage a classroom of children, because it's an extremely difficult thing to do. I think the thing is, as a psychologist, I see that children show us what's going on for them through their behaviour. And we know that, like, when we're trained as psychologists and we're looking at mental health of children, we're given lists of behaviours to look for. to look at to whether they might be experiencing anxiety or depression or any other mental health problems. So I think I see behaviour in a much wider way than many teachers would see behaviour, because I just see it as part of the way that a child is expressing how they are right now. And that's particularly for children. But it actually goes for teenagers as well. And I think in a way, teenagers are often the trickiest ones, because I think we understand that children behave in childish ways. That's understandable. But with teenagers, they look much bigger. We often have more of an expectation that they will be able to behave in quite adult ways, when actually we know that their brains are still really immature, and their brains carry on developing up to the age of at least 25. And the things that they're developing are the skills which enable us to manage our behaviour. They are developing the skills of self-management, of impulse control, of being able to see and think about the future. All of those things are still in development very, very much in teenagers. So I think that's part of the problem. It's that I see children who are having a tough time as the ones whose behaviour is the most challenging in schools. And so I think that then to make the trips at the end a reward for that behaviour, to me feels really wrong, because it feels like we're rewarding the children who don't have those struggles. We're rewarding the children who find school easier and who have had an easier year. And I think that's probably a big difference in how I see behaviour to how many teachers might see it, where I think it's often portrayed as more of an intentional choice. You know, these children have chosen to do well during the year. These children haven't, so it's only fair that these children don't get to go on the trip. Whereas I would see we've got children who are showing us that are having a tough time. Even actually those truanting children, I would say, you know, something is going wrong if a child is truanting from school. And we may have many, many theories about why that is, and it might not be anything to do at school at all. But generally, happy children who are thriving and learning will not be truanting. Children want to participate in the world. They want to do well, generally. That would be my kind of approach. But I think it's interesting what you said, Lucy, about saying to the children in your class, you know, you won't get to go to camp, because I think you'd find that probably a couple of them do believe you, and they won't tell you, but they might well tell their parents. So most of the class won't. Most of the class will be like, yeah, she doesn't mean it, we're okay. But a couple of them will. And the couple who will might be the ones who actually have a more unstable home life, perhaps, or who don't necessarily know that actually they are quite well behaved. You know what I mean? It's the ones who have a less kind of stable sense of self. So in a way, the most vulnerable children are the ones who are most affected by this kind of holding up of things as you've got to do this so that you can get the reward. And I think there are so many different aspects to it, because it's not just about the behaviour. It's also about the child who is behaving perfectly well, but is absolutely eaten up with anxiety about what might happen if they don't make the trip or if they're excluded. And so I suppose that's what I hear about.
I mean, it's interesting because I think in school, and Nathan, you can kind of touch on this with me as well, the often rewards-based system are just it's kind of part. I mean, it's more sort of certainly as a primary teacher, rewards-based sort of systems are kind of something that sort of I've had instilled in me in teacher training. Of course, that's evolved and that's changed over time, and it differs per school. But you know, it's almost in my mind difficult to kind of shake that approach to things when it's something that's almost I wouldn't say so intrinsic to the classroom, but it's certainly, you know, there are things like, and I know they're not the same thing, but things like house points, things like dojos, things like, you know, all these kind of rewards-based systems that we have. It almost seems that it sort of makes sense that you'd then extend that to trips and things as well.
I think that's totally spot on. I think at the end of the day, all humans, primary school, kids, secondary school, we all want rewards. We all want to see our behaviour rewarded if it's good. You know, we've all applied for jobs. We all want to get, you know, good feedback on the things that we do. So, you know, I do think that rewards are intrinsic really to how schools run. I just wanted to link back to a few things that sort of Naomi said, to sort of build on that debate. And I think the first common ground we can definitely find is around the idea of self-regulating behavior. And I think, Naomi's sort of made that point. Students or, teenagers are finding their way with self-regulation. They're trying to work out how to behave in different contexts. They're learning what is the right way to go about things. They're learning what is, not appropriate to do. And of course, school is a time to do that. And with teachers' support is a time to do that. It's time for students to get things wrong and learn and improve. But I think it's really important that we acknowledge that not all poor behaviour has an underlying cause. I think that's quite a sweeping statement to say, every kid who's got the most behaviour points, or every kid who's, been suspended, there is some underlying major thing sometimes. And I think we've probably all done it. I'm sure we've all had a detention. It's, when we were at school, we probably all pushed the boundaries at some point. And sometimes that's just teenagers being a little bit rebellious. It's just kids, pushing the boundaries a little bit. So I think we do need to acknowledge that yes, a lot of behaviour is communication, and it is so important that we acknowledge what is happening at home, what's happening in friendship groups, what's happening with different teachers and around the school. Those are all really important factors. But actually, sometimes poor behaviour is just poor behaviour, and we can call it that. We can challenge that, but then we can also help a student to improve that. But I think overall, if we have a student who is in school and they're not meeting expectations, then they can't automatically go on a trip. I think that's a really important point we get back to. We can't just say, regardless of their behaviour, regardless of what they're communicating, they automatically get to go on a school trip.
But many schools do that. So not every school frames these trips as rewards. So there's a choice that the school can make about whether we frame these trips as rewards. And I think there's two different issues that are really different and that have been really merged in the debate. There's one is whether these trips are framed as a reward which children have to earn. And I know that happens a lot. I've seen parents send me letters and screenshots all the time of their schools setting up the reward system. I talked to a parent this morning who was saying every student has been put on whether they're platinum, gold, silver or bronze, and told whether they're on a trajectory that's going to get them to the school trip or not. So that is definitely happening. But then there's a safeguarding issue, and there are some children whose behaviour is going to be tricky on a school trip, and that they may not be able to access. I think those two things are really entirely different, because if you're saying to a child or a parent, we can't bring you on this trip because we don't believe, for example, that you will not run off on this trip or that you won't put other people at risk on this trip. That is different to saying you can't go because we are punishing you. One is a kind of shaming message, which puts the responsibility with the child, whereas I think one is more of a thing about accessibility, where we're saying, as a school, we actually can't make this accessible to you. So it puts the responsibility in a different place. And I think for the child and the family, that makes a massive difference. Because actually to be excluded from something with shame attached, I think it's very unlikely to lead to positive behaviour change.
Vicky, sorry, I'm just going to interrupt you both just for a second, Nathan. I will come back to you, I promise. Just a couple of tweets that have come in that or posts rather, because we're on X now. We're not allowed to say tweets anymore. I still refuse to call it X, but we're going to try our best to roll. So if I say Twitter, you will know what I mean. A couple of ones that have come in, just kind of sticking along this rewards theme that we've been talking about. Dee has said, my daughter's school has been dangling a carrot of an end-of-year rewards trip for the last 2 terms. 220 students in Year 7, only 100 places available. Totally unfair for those students that will never get to go. Now, that's sort of framing it slightly differently. I don't know if she means, is that a first-come, first-served thing, or if that's or if that's more of a, we'll take the 100 of you who we feel are, able to go. I don't know. How would you both read into that? And Nathan, given that I just rudely interrupted you, I'm going to come to you first on that one.
I think if that school, and obviously we don't know the context, we don't know a lot of details, but if that school is sort of choosing the top 100 students with reward points and 120 stay back, that doesn't sit comfortably with me. If we're talking about reward trips, and I think actually I'd quite like to nuance this with the most common type of trip in school will be a curriculum trip. They're going to be more common than a rewards trip. But if we're talking about rewards trips, then if we're taking half a cohort and leaving the other half back at school, I'd agree that doesn't feel fair. I'd want somebody to be able to explain why that was fair to me. That doesn't seem right.
Nathan, again, I can see you've got your hand up there. What has piqued your interest?
Yeah, I think, there's a really interesting part here around what the trip is for. And particularly, you've spoken about whether this is part of a curriculum or whether this is part of a reward or whether this is, something even less than that. And the thing that worries me is that a lot of schools are maybe writing into policy here that or somewhat boasting about that these things are on offer, or that they are part of a cultural capital, or they are part of a behaviour scheme or policy that is improving something that should be on offer to everyone if it is part of a curriculum. And I think Nathan Burns was kind of getting on to that. There is behaviour curriculums that exist within schools, as well as pure curriculum, history curriculums, and some schools may well be leaning on this and saying, look, if it is part of a behaviour, it should be open to all. And that would be one of kind of my points, is where are we sitting on this? Because treats are not necessarily, although valid in some cases, the same as a curriculum entitlement that some schools should be offering.
I don't know who wants to jump in on that.
Yes, so from my perspective, I know that in school you'd see the curriculum as separate for rewards. I would basically think if a trip is worth doing, then I think it has value. It has all sorts of things that those young people are going to learn from that trip, even if it isn't ostensibly an educational trip. And it's particularly actually going to have value to those children who maybe don't usually get to go on trips. Because just getting out their town into a different place, even if that place is a theme park, is going to be a different experience for them. And I think that there's a lot of learning that goes on every time you go out of your immediate environment, which is really important for young people. So personally, I wouldn't see as a distinction. I think, if a school thinks a trip is worth doing and worth putting the effort in, then I would like to see it as something which they would make every effort for every young person to come on, because it's worth putting all that effort in. So I wouldn't make that distinction myself.
Interesting. Okay. There are a couple of bits I want to come on to. I'm going to give you a bit of a breather just to have a think about your thoughts on these in a moment. The first thing is, and they kind of feed into each other and feed into what we've already been talking about. The first thing is, we've talked about curriculum trips and we've talked about reward trips, and we've also they're also the kind of the residentials, which I suppose kind of feed into reward, kind of feed into, I suppose, both in a way, really. It kind of depends what you're doing. Because I've just seen a tweet here that says, I think the time aspect of a residential trip is another example of teachers' time not being respected, seen as okay to encroach on it more and more via workload or increasing evening sessions. We should do them, but teachers 100% should get time back, and this should be funded as a right. So I want to kind of think and touch on this idea of, yes, I think curriculum trips are important. Yes, we've talked about the importance of that. But these idea of residentials, even just taking the behaviour factor out for a moment, is this and should this be part of kind of a teacher's remit? And that's the first bit. And then I want to bring back the safety element as a whole, with trips in general, but also in terms of these residentials as well. So just for you to kind of ponder for the moment, just whilst we have a chat about our sponsors here at Teachers Talk Radio. We've got a fair few at the moment, and we'd like to thank them for being able to make these shows happen. So bear with me, because there are a few lovely ones at the moment, and it will also give my guests a bit of thinking time as well. Our first is we are delighted to have John Catt back, and they are partnering with us, and they are educational publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. They have a vast catalogue of books available at johncattbookshop.com. Everything, any aspect of education you want to read up upon if you're looking for some summer reading. And to add, as an added bonus, we have a new discount code for you, which is JCTTR2425, and that gives you 20% off your order. So happy reading as and when you get around to using that. Next up, we have Reading Solutions. Are you looking for best practices and innovative strategies to faster, confident, lifelong readers? Join the free online, free International Reading Conference on the 11th, 12th and 13th of June. You're going to be able to hear from speakers like TV personality and education expert Basit Siddiqui, beloved children's author and friend of Teachers Talk Radio Michael Rosen, and National Literacy Trust's Irene Picton. Through the 3-day conference, speakers will explore a range of topics at the forefront of the current educational landscape, with sessions relevant for all educators and key stages. And if you want more information on that, you need to go to readingsolutions.co.uk to grab your free ticket. Okay. Next up, we have Easy For You, who were guests of Tom Rogers and James Radburn the other day. Where innovation meets accessibility. Their subscription-based offering not only equips schools with cutting-edge devices, but revolutionises the learning experience by eliminating financial barriers, streamlining support, and embracing technology. Easy For You isn't just providing tools, they are shaping a future where every student can thrive, unburdened by limitations. Easy For You are transforming education one device at a time, and you can find more information at easyforyou.school. I think that's the right link. I want to just double check that because it does seem a bit of a strange one. So Nathan, again, if please check for me that that is correct. I don't want to give people incorrect information. And then finally, we have Apps for Good, and this gives schools free introductory computing courses. The courses are for everyone, including those who aren't computing teachers, and they're fully equipped with resources mapped to the UK computing curriculums. Students will develop essential and digital skills by working in teams to create a prototype app for good. And if you want more information on that, appsforgood.org is your place to go. We also have these all over Twitter, so if you missed any of that, I will mention them again. And so that's a lot of information I've just thrown at you. So if you didn't catch all of it, do not worry. We will try and repeat them again as the show goes on. And in true me fashion, I've completely forgotten what I asked my guests. Oh yeah, it was about residentials and about teachers actually taking time out. Of course, we have the curriculum trips, which are absolutely part of the curriculum and very important. But I want to, I suppose, home in on, because these are kind of what interests me, are these more residential trips, or maybe these sort of end of year trips to places like theme parks. Is this something that teachers should have to do as a requirement? Because it is a lot. I mean, certainly from an organisation, from a safeguarding point of view, do you feel that it's too much of an ask, or is this just kind of part and parcel of what we as teachers sign up for? Nathan Burns, coming to you on that question.
Yeah, so I know that I've been someone who has got out of doing residentials, Duke of Edinburgh's, just because it's that commitment, isn't it? It's giving up, your family life for 2-3 days, a whole week. So I absolutely do not think that should be something that we expect all teachers to do. If teachers are happy to do it, then that's fantastic. But teachers definitely deserve the pay and the time that is taken up with going on those residentials. So if it's during a holiday, then that time needs to be given back to staff for that. I definitely don't think it's just something we can presume that staff are going to do just because they've decided to be a teacher.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Empowering education with Easy For You, where innovation meets accessibility. Our subscription-based offering not only equips schools with cutting-edge devices, but revolutionises the learning experience by eliminating financial barriers, streamlining support, and embracing technology. We're not just providing tools, we're shaping a future where every student can thrive, unburdened by limitations. Easy For You, transforming education, one device at a time. Find out more at www.easyforyou.school.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Reading Solutions UK. Are you looking for best practices and innovative strategies to foster confident, lifelong readers? Join the free online International Reading Conference on the 11th, 12th and 13th of June. Hear from speakers like TV personality and education expert Basit Siddiqui, beloved children's author Michael Rosen, fluency expert Tim Rosinski, EEF specialist Chloe Butlin, the National Literacy Trust's Irene Picton, and a range of experienced practitioners, including MAT leaders, deputy heads, heads of English, high-level teaching assistants, and school librarians. Through the 3-day conference, speakers will explore a range of topics at the forefront of the current educational landscape, with sessions relevant for all educators and key stages. Visit Reading Solutions at readingsolutionsuk.co.uk for more information and to sign up for this free conference.
Hi teachers, we're Apps for Good, and we give schools like yours free introductory computing courses. Our courses are for everyone, including those who aren't computing teachers, and they're fully equipped with resources mapped to the UK computing curriculum. Independent learning is central to our courses. Your students will develop essential and digital skills by working in teams to create prototype apps for good. We'll even connect you with industry volunteers to give real-world feedback. Let's empower every young person you teach to shape their future with technology. Speak to us at www.appsforgood.org.
Welcome to Teachers Talk Radio. Thank you for listening.
Naomi, I know you come from a sort of outside looking in perspective, but from your point of view, do you think that this should just be part and parcel of a teacher's remit, or do you think that there should be some caveats or some kind of aspect where, you know, if you opting in, opting out?
I think
to know your thoughts.
I mean, I think the thing about residential trips is that when I talk to people as adults, when I talk to people in therapy as adults, and they've had a really tough time at school, sometimes they remember a residential trip as a kind of real beacon of something different, and a time when things were really felt better for them, and when they were able to be part of the school community in a way that they maybe weren't when they were actually at school. So I do think they have huge value, but I don't think teachers should be forced to do them, because absolutely I think they lose value if it's something that people are obliged to do. I don't know how that would work, but I think it should be ideally something that teachers are able to opt into, but also that teachers could feel was a real value and could see that they're not, you know, I think it almost lightens the value of these things when we talk about them as reward trips, for example, because I think that they have such extra value for children. They add such a lot of enrichment, particularly to the most deprived children and those who are struggling the most. And I guess it's part of valuing that and seeing that as a value rather than just seeing it as an extra that teachers have got to do, if you see what I mean. Yeah.
Interesting, because it's, of course, all these things are incredibly enriching, incredibly important, and all the rest of it. And I suppose this is where we do get to the nitty gritty, and where I'm going to bring in the word safety. And I'm talking about student safety, pupil safety, but I also think, and it kind of goes without saying, that we also really need to touch on teacher safety here. And I think a lot of and I'm just looking at some of the tweets that I've bookmarked, and a lot of the time when this debate has kind of blown up, that is the concern that comes up. It's teachers saying, well, hang on a minute, I've got student X who has been, quite frankly, foul to me all year for X, Y, Z reasons. Why on earth should I, as their teacher, be taking them anywhere? I don't feel obliged to do that. I also don't entirely trust them because they've maybe been verbally or even physically dangerous, and so not only do I feel that they compromise their own safety and other children's safety, but also me as a teacher. So that's a lot of there are many tweets, and you can kind of go and see all over X at the moment, So I just want to know kind of, I mean, this is sort of, I mean, I'm opening a very broad and very big can of worms here, but I know, Nathan, that this is kind of where you sort of sit on this, the idea that, and I've just given a very kind of broad, very generalized example there, but just from, if we're going to open up this question of safety sort of for pupils and for teachers, I mean, and I'm talking across from primary all the way through to, you know, the top end of secondary. Is this something that maybe we have not thought enough about, or maybe we're not taking enough considerations for particularly for teacher safety as well? Because ultimately, we are the ones who are responsible here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the most stressful thing I've probably done as a teacher was leading a trip, because you are going out of the safety of the classroom, out of the safety of the school, and actually what is quite a controlled environment suddenly becomes, you know, uncontrolled. You don't know what's going to happen on the roads. You don't know what's going to happen with members of the public. There are suddenly a lot of factors that you'd normally be able to control that you can't. So if you're taking a school trip down to London, you suddenly could be using the tube, you know, or sometimes if you're going abroad, you know, flights, that there's so many things that can go wrong. So even if you have the sort of the most perfectly behaved kids who would never say boo to a goose, who've never had a behavior point, who've never done anything wrong in sort of that utopian world, they're absolutely perfect. It's still going to be a stressful experience. I mean, me going down and getting the tube, I want to make sure that I'm getting on the right train and I'm getting on the correct line, let alone trying to take 30 kids with me. It's an incredibly stressful situation. And that would be with 30 sort of, you know, perfectly behaved kids. And as soon as you throw in a few students who haven't demonstrated in school that they can meet instructions, I think that offers a huge stress. And that is where we start to get into the remit of students who can't come. Because if in the controlled environment of school, you have got a student who repeatedly, you know, maybe daily, they're having to be removed from the classroom, maybe they have been suspended a couple of times. On a trip, there is no way to remove them from your classroom. There is no way to go and put them in an isolation room or timeouts, or whatever you want to call it. You don't have any of that support. If something starts to go wrong on a trip, you're with that student all day long, and you're actually in a very uncontrolled environment of being out in the public, you know, at a museum, you know, wherever you might be. So from a staff perspective, there are definitely reasons why some students shouldn't be going. And I think the other thing that we need to consider is 30 kids could be going on a trip. One of them could have shown poor behaviour in school and has maybe disrupted learning at school, and has maybe held the other 29 back because of that disruption. If we then take that extra kid on the trip, are they actually just going to ruin the day for the other 29? Because obviously if they're disrupting learning in lesson, there's a high chance that could happen out on the trip. This isn't me saying that, if you've ever misbehaved in class, you never get to go on a trip. And actually, I've organised a lot of trips and I have never removed a student from going on that trip. So we are talking about quite a rare circumstance, but there are definitely occasions where we need to think about the safety of staff, whether we can trust that student to do what we need instantly, because there will be occasions on trips where that has to happen. And we do also need to consider, the other 99% of students going on that trip.
Oh, most definitely. And, I think it is interesting. And I know that there are arguments or points that have come up, or kind of points of information, if you like, if we're going to use debating terminology, where people have said, yes, there are children who are deliberately disruptive. And then there are children who are disruptive for a variety of reasons, be it additional need, be it a huge variety of things. And so do we not need to, and I'm sure Naomi has some thoughts, is this where we maybe need to be also a little bit mindful about, if we are going to exclude children from these trips, we need to be kind of damn sure that, we're excluding someone because of, choices they are making, or because there is real genuine concern for safety, and it's not because we've kind of missed a beat when it comes to their need or what they're going through. And Naomi, I'm sure you can articulate this far better than I can.
Yeah, so I think, again, it's two different issues. There's the issue of students whose behaviour might mean that they cannot cope with a group environment out on a trip, and there are absolutely many of those. But if we're thinking about that, then the question we might be asking is, are there ways we could make this accessible for them? Because if it's important, it's an important part of the curriculum that they get to do these things. If they have a parent with them, for example, with who will take them off if they need to take them off, are there ways we can make that possible for them? That's quite different to the you can't come because we are punishing you. And I think that has longer term implications for that young person when they are sort of visibly shamed, because they're visibly shamed in front of the class as well. And I think that's very unlikely to lead to positive behaviour change. And I think if we're wanting to use, say, rewards and punishments, my question would always be, okay, does it work? Is it actually going to help? So when we've got that example that you had in the tweet of 220 year 7, only 100 of which are going to get to the reward trip, I would be really interested to know what the school is trying to achieve with that, what they think, because they're effectively going to punish 120 children. And that is likely to have negative consequences for those young people in how they feel about school and potentially their behaviour as well. So I just think the framing is really important. And I've read a lot of tweets where people are like, I don't want to take this child because of this behaviour. And I absolutely understand that. But I think as adults, we do need to step back and avoid getting into a kind of punitive relationship with young people, because I've had young people say many things to me. I've had young people be very, very challenging. I've been up against some very challenging behaviour, not in a classroom situation, but in the course of my work. And I can't get into then a punitive relationship with that because I'm the professional. I have to be. And I have to be thinking, okay, if this is, maybe you can't come on the trip, but I would really like it not to be because we're punishing you.
Interesting. But I mean, often as I'm sure you are acutely aware, Naomi, and Nathan, you'll know this from your own experiences. Often I've found that we're kind of, these trips are an expectation, and often you're told, okay, we'll give you X and Y adults from school. I mean, I've had situations where I've taken a year 2 teaching assistant on a year 5 residential because there was nobody else. Now, was he perfectly equipped to be on that trip? Absolutely. But in my mind, did he kind of know those children, know the kind of ins and outs of sort of, because with these trips, often, they'll sort of say, oh, well, you just need to make up the numbers in terms of the adults. You just need to have enough adults. And that is, in absolutely my mind, not. And again, it's simply not true, because I'm sorry, a body is not just a body. When you've got a group, particularly if you've got a difficult group, and I don't know, Nathan, what your experience with this is, it's, schools need to, and SLT and all the rest of it need to understand that if you're going to be sending your staff out and putting them in the proverbial firing line, that they have the staff and the correct staff, for that matter, or the correct parents or whatever that is. Because it's very easy to say, off you pop, you've got the ratios, that's fine. It's not that simple.
Absolutely. The difference between having having an adult there who gets the most challenging children is the difference between success and not success, in my experience.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. If you've got the staff who work well with those students, and if you're looking at ways that you can change the approach to the day so that they're with the TA that works really well with them and they really have a good, professional relationship with, then yes, the student go on the trip. But yeah, making up numbers just so you tick a ratio box, it's where things are going to start to go wrong for sure.
I mean, yeah, it's a difficult one, and this again comes back to the safety aspect as well, because if that member of staff isn't sort of overly familiar with those children or a particular child, and things do kick off, things do go wrong, and they don't know that, if you just, again, I'm being grossly simplistic here, that actually if you just put a hand on their back, or if there's a certain kind of way of talking to them, or a phrase you need to say to them that can kind of help them start regulate again, or bring them back down in inverted commas. It's it goes from kind of being what could be a successful trip and a situation where that child in particular could actually thrive, to a situation that is ends up being grossly mismanaged, not necessarily through the fault of the teachers, but through the fault of kind of the wider school community.
And that's something to me about valuing the relationships that some staff have with pupils, and how important those relationships are, and how having the right relationship between a challenging pupil and anyone. It doesn't have to be a teacher. It could be a TA who has a connection with them, or it could be a parent, but that can make all the difference. That can mean that they could go on something and it could be a success. And then it becomes a positive experience for them and a positive experience for the class. And then you get into a kind of virtuous circle as opposed to the vicious circle that can, in my experience, be set off if there's a kind of shaming, punitive response when they're not allowed to go on these things.
Go on, Nathan.
Yeah, I just don't think a kid not being allowed on a trip due to behaviour demonstrated in school, it's not punitive, it's not a further punishment. So I've made some sort of notes here. You know, I've had a student who's hit me before. Do I then want to take them on a trip where I am their little group leader? What if they do it again and I don't have another member of staff near me? I've had a student who's taken drugs in my classroom. Do I want to be taking them out on a trip where we need to be calling an ambulance and it's me and one other member of staff? That is, you know, very, very high risk situations. You know, I've known students who are flight risks who aren't able to go on a trip because if you've got a student who's a flight risk and you're heading down to London to jump on the underground, then there are very many opportunities where that student could, you know, disappear. And actually that's putting the students in awful situations and it's putting the staff in horrendous situations. So, you know, if a student has hit me, do I want them in my group on a trip? You know, no. If a student has taken drugs in my lessons and then I'm, you know, in charge of their group and I might need to call an ambulance or whatever. So me saying you're not allowed to come because of what has happened in school, that's not punitive. That's not further punishment. That is ensuring my safety and it's ensuring the safety of that individual as well.
I think that depends how it's done. Because I think you're right. I absolutely agree that there are behaviours which you cannot take the child out safely. But I think there can be a particular level of shaming about it. Like when I've seen things which say, you know, that the child must come into school in their school uniform and go through a normal school day, even though everybody else is out of school. And I would just question as to what that is going to achieve, whether that is going to improve that child's behaviour or their relationship with school.
But if they can't go on the school trip for any given reason, there's no other place but school for them to go.
So you mean that they have to go through a normal school day even though nobody else is there? And they have to come and sort of be not visibly there? I don't know. It's a problem, isn't it? I think it means thinking about what could be done so that...
But I mean, I suppose I suppose in that sense, I mean, yes, if you're going to make that, I mean, this is just kind of devil's advocating here. If you're going to put that child in school, is that not, because if, say it's primary school where, you know, you're with your class teacher most of the time, you then also have to, I suppose, I mean, I'm gonna use the term inconvenience here because I can't think of a better term at the moment. You're going to have to inconvenience another member of staff, which you do. If you're going to leave somebody behind, there has to be a contingency plan where you have to say to another teacher or teachers, hey, this kid is going to be in school, the rest of us are out. You know, you're going to have to provide work for that child. You're going to have to, you know, and this is, I suppose, a bad way to look at it, but from a workload point of view, is it, Nathan's cases, some of those extreme cases are horrendous, but is it maybe less work, in inverted commas, to take that child with you as opposed to arrange contingency plans for them?
I wouldn't say so. I think the risks involved with taking some students, that extra little bit of work or putting them in somebody else's class, you know, it is not too much work compared to the stresses you'll have. I'd also like to point out where I have been involved with trips where students haven't been allowed to go because they're flight risks or behaviour. It's not as if all of those students and parents, you know, throw their arms up in dismay. Actually, when that's happened, I've known a lot of parents to be completely supportive. The students have sometimes been the ones to have taken themselves away from the trip and said, actually, this isn't a good situation for me to be in. I will stay at school. That is fine with me. So just because a student isn't allowed on a trip doesn't automatically mean that they or their parents and carers are going to be distraught. Actually, sometimes there is agreement there, or very often I think there's agreement there from parents and carers that it isn't always the appropriate thing to try to find a way to take them on the trip or risk taking them on the trip.
Yes, and I think that's fine. And in a way, that's ideal if everybody can agree, actually, this isn't the right thing right now. We can't make this accessible enough. But I do think there's a difference to the letter that says you have got you haven't attended enough school, you haven't got enough behaviour points, and therefore you are not allowed to come on the reward day. Particularly, actually, they have reward days in school as well sometimes, where they'll bring something into the school, and some children will be doing the reward activity day, other children won't. I do think that's problematic, and I think it's unlikely to improve the child's relationship with school.
I completely agree. That does, again, appear problematic to me. I just don't know how common that is. We don't have data on that. I appreciate, schools where this has happened, but I don't know any schools where this has happened. So I think we, again, have to be careful where we know of a few case studies and kind of say that happens across 25,000 UK schools. Actually, it might happen in a few scenarios, and unfortunately those are the scenarios we hear about, but the vast majority of schools and school leaders won't make those decisions and won't put students in those positions. They will make the right choices for their students and for their staff, but not in the same sort of situations you're raising there, Naomi.
Yeah, I mean, we have no way of knowing, do we? We just don't know how many schools are doing this, because parents do say that it seems to be happening more, that maybe trips that previously weren't framed as reward trips are now framed as reward trips. I think that actually this is particularly with attendance. I know we weren't going to focus mainly on attendance, but I'm hearing more and more about things being related to attendance trips. And I think that's due to the pressure to try and get 100% attendance.
And this isn't me being awkward, but in all the schools I've worked in, I've never been involved with a reward trip, and I've not known of a reward trip going out. They have been purely academic-based trips. So this isn't me trying to be awkward, but I've not come across those.
No, that's really good to hear. Yeah. So then, I guess the issue is this trip accessible to this young person perhaps because we can't guarantee their safety or the safety of the others on the trip? And if it's not, are there things that we can do to get around that? Or if there aren't, then what other arrangement can we make for them?
Yeah, I think that's something we can definitely agree on.
Fantastic. I've just invited Charlotte in, and I'm keen to know, Charlotte, I don't know is it Charlotte Towell or Charlotte,
yeah.
You can tell me what piqued your interest? Because I know there's a lot going on in this conversation. I just want to know what bit particularly got your interest.
A few bits. So I'm interested as to where this reward, the idea of a trip being a reward, came from, and why. I think the difference between primary and secondary is possibly quite big. So I'm primary based, and I've not known of trips being used as rewards. I've known of one child who we all agreed was not safe to go on a trip, which was a very, very last minute decision. We'd tried absolutely everything to get him there. I went on the trip, and when I was there, I agreed actually that child would not have coped. It wouldn't have been fair on him. It wouldn't have been fair on anyone else, and it would have ended in disaster. However, I also have taken groups of very high need children. I teach a specialist class in a mainstream school. I took 5 year twos. A few of them are non-verbal. Others have very violent outbursts at times. We did leading up to the trip. If there were any of these set behaviours, we would have to get back on the minibus purely for safety. And they were all great throughout the trip. There was a little area, there was like a corridor of the museum that was quiet, where we were able to take them if needed. And we just made sure that we'd almost covered all bases, so that they could be included, which was really important, especially at that age. And I know that throughout primary, that's quite common practice. What I'm hearing is that in secondary, it doesn't seem to be. So it seems, from what I'm hearing, it seems to be that for more minor offences than the children that I teach show, they are, given behaviour points or left out. And I just worry about children's self-esteem, because even though teachers may not mean it as a punishment, you don't know how that child has taken it. Even if they've smiled at you and nodded and gone okay, like deep down inside, that's going to hurt and that's going to have long-term impact.
I don't know who wants to leap in. I'm sure both of you have got thoughts. Nathan, because Nathan, are you secondary? Remind me.
I'm secondary, and I think that what Charlotte just said about primary versus secondary being very different, I think it is true. I think the behaviours that are probably seen in primary are going to be different to the behaviours seen in secondary, and the risks are going to be different. And I'm not going to say it's easier in primary, but I think the risks may at some points be easier to alleviate, and you've got smaller group sizes, which may again make it easier. To begin,
Nathan, I don't know if you've ever tried to chase a little year one that's gone rogue, but those, they might have little legs, but believe me, they can bolt if they want to.
And they can
climb. Yes, they can get very far away.
And fit in surprisingly confined spaces as well.
Yeah. Yeah. They know how to disappear. No, I completely get that. I guess I'm just thinking of the issues of, if there was a physical act on a teacher, it's more likely, potentially more likely from secondary. I'm not sure. That's maybe something we can discuss at a different point. But I think what Charlotte said to begin with in terms of, most trips are curriculum-based trips. Very rarely are students excluded. That's what I've seen, and that's what I have heard from everybody who's really piped up on sort of the debate that I've seen over the weekend. A lot of people saying, most trips are curriculum based, and actually most of the time the vast majority of students go, and where things can be put in place to alleviate potential problems for students, especially around SEN requirements, those things can be put into place on school trips. That's perfectly possible as well.
Naomi, anything to add?
Yes, I was just thinking, I think you've hit on something there, Charlotte, and that lots of people talk to me about the difference in expectations between year 6 and year 7. But when you go to secondary school, there's suddenly a much higher load of expectations on young people of what they'll be able to manage and what they need to manage. And a more self-management is required of them very quickly when they go into secondary school. And I think that often the onus is put back on them. And that's my reservation about the whole system of behaviour points. It's all about the onus being on the young people, whereas what you're talking about at primary school level is really the teachers and the school taking the responsibility for how can we make this trip work and how can we make it easier for the young people, who some of whom we know are going to find this hard. How can we manage that? And of course, as children grow up, that needs to happen. There needs to be a moving of the responsibility from adults caretaking young people to young people self-regulating and managing themselves. But I think there's a bit of a sort of very big step up between year 6 and year 7, which some kids just fall in that gap. I know Nathan's been putting his hand up. Is he still the other Nathan? Sorry.
Well, Nathan Ginn, you were looking.
I think for me, it looks like the other Nathan has been waving his yellow hand, but is that not the case? Maybe he isn't. Yeah.
Occasionally I do. Occasionally something piques my interest, and I think, but then I also want to hear what both of you have to say. I'm finding it really interesting. One of the things that I found really interesting from Nathan saying there was about, and also I think Lucy said, was about this idea of it not being safe and what we can do to make it safe. And I do wonder whether schools are looking at, particularly with ratios on trips, and sort of saying, okay, we are taking free staff because that's what we're allowed, and so this trip cannot be safe. And whether there really is, people are sort of pushing back on that and saying, what can we do to make this safe for as many young people as possible? And sort of saying, actually, on this trip, I need 5 staff. And then I would be able to take everyone. And whether there is a pressure there, whether it be from management or staffing or whatever, about what we actually need as staff to be able to run trips that are more accessible for more young people and safer for more young people to do that, and around that risk assessment process. So I kind of wanted to ask Nathan there, maybe around that, about where would he see the limit on what schools were willing to do to make it able for as many young people as possible to go on that trip?
I think what I've often come up against is that the most staff you can often get to go out on a trip is the minimum ratio requirement, because it's not just it's not just a case of cover, it's also the costs that come with that cover. Often schools are footing the bill for a lot of trips nowadays. I mean, I think all of the trips I organised in my previous school, I think we maybe asked for sort of £5 on one of them, and the other sort of dozen I organised were all free. We footed the bill, or I drove the minibus, or, you know, we got some sponsorship in, whatever it was. So we're already, you know, covering a lot of costs of the trip, covering the minimum sort of number of staff going out, covering their you know, covering their lessons, or having cover TAs in, because some students need to have the TA with them all the time. That gets very, very expensive. So ideally, yes, we would have more staff go out, and we would also have the staff that work particularly well with certain students. But staffing and funding just don't allow that. So I think we either have trips run as they are, or trips just potentially don't happen. And I think they are starting to happen less and less, because budgets are being squeezed more and more. And we can't expect parents to make up that cost deficit. Parents aren't exactly flush with money. So it is a major, major issue. And I do think the number of trips is going to keep reducing, or at least it has from what I've seen in schools.
Very interesting indeed. I've seen that our lovely admin Hannah's got her hand up. Hannah.
I am just loving tonight. It's been great listening. But I thought that was really an interesting point about trips. I think obviously trips stopped with COVID, and then it's been a real slow process of reintroducing them. So is it the kids have kind of don't know how to act on trips because they haven't been on them, or there's even more like overexcitement about when trips do happen because they haven't been on them, then they're like more excitement, so they get more excited and the behaviour's worse. I mean, I've loved the great points, because I've seen all of them. I've run trips where teachers have refused to take certain students, and I'm like, no, I feel like they should have the chance. I've rung parents and had them down the road in a cafe 5 minutes away, so if they do kick off, they come and pick them up. And actually, they've been absolutely fine and just really appreciated the chance. And then I've also had been in schools where they've done the reward charts, where if they get over a certain number of points and under a certain number of demerit points, they're allowed to go, but there's only a certain number of spaces, and then parents have to pay for that. So even if they are really, really good, they might not necessarily even get to go. So trips is just this absolute minefield. But I just want to say how amazing it was. But is it that there haven't been enough trips, or do we need more, but there's just not enough funding and it's difficult to do them? If they were more regular, would kids be better behaved on them?
I think, I totally agree with that. In my previous school, we had a really deprived area, and this was before COVID, and the kids were amazing on trips, and you wouldn't even know what they were like in the classroom from what you saw them on trips. But then the school I went to after COVID, there was a lot more prep needed before the trips, because they just didn't know how to cope, and they were so excited with the most basic things of going on a coach. It was insane.
I think that's an interesting point as well, because of course we all missed out on a lot, and certainly, I mean, I know I have absolutely waxed lyrical, and I bring COVID up any chance I can, weirdly, which seems to be a kind of mild obsession. But I think Hannah does raise a valid point that if we did more of this, then maybe, it would expose these children to doing this more. But of course, within that, there are all the things that we've talked about, the staffing, the cost constraints, all the rest of it. I know that, I should explain that I'm in a privileged environment in an international school, and we've actually been told on occasions, to rein ourselves in a bit. I mean, the luxury, but to rein ourselves in a bit, because, we can't be kind of going every 5 minutes. But I suppose, there is a delicate balancing act to be had here.
I wonder if we did more learning outside of the classroom, within the school grounds, we could train children on those behaviours that are needed outside of the classroom, rather than just always being inside, because we train them so well on sitting at a table, listening, following instructions within the classroom. But as soon as you go out of the classroom, it's so different. To be able to listen whilst in a field, for example, is very different to in a classroom.
In a howling gale on the pouring rain.
Exactly.
It's usually the way, isn't it? And when you'd rather genuinely be anywhere else. Anyway, I digress. Sorry, did anyone else want to jump in on that?
I just wanted to say that's kind of what I mean when I say I don't really see a distinction between curriculum trips and other trips, because you just can't tell which bit of a trip is going to be the bit that a child might remember, and it might be the coach trip. or it might be, you know, chatting to one of the teachers at a point, or realizing that the teachers actually have a life outside the classroom. That kind of thing might be the thing that for that child makes all the difference. You can't guarantee that it's going to be the exhibition about the ancient Egyptians or whatever it is that you actually think you're going to see. But I just think also just getting out of the classroom is so important for some kids, and it's particularly important for the kids who really struggle in the classroom, because being in a different environment gives them a chance to see people differently and to behave differently and to experience different things.
I made the absolute schoolgirl error of telling a year 5 class a couple of years ago, and I've done it actually ever since, of telling them that when we go on camp, I won't expect you to do anything that I wouldn't do myself. And so there exists some fantastic footage of me leaping off things, screeching down slides, all kinds of absolutely just comical footage that I will have to share one of these days. But as you and these kids still talk about. Yeah, they still talk about that because that's what they remember. Instead of, you kind of, where you've got a little bit cross in class or whatever it is, which I am a little bit at the moment. I think we're all a bit tetchy end of year. But I have said to them, I have even said to my year 4s that I'm taking, I will be in that water with you. And I've had parasites and all sorts courtesy of camp. I have come back ill off camps before, but I've not stopped doing them. But I do want to come back to something, and I'm going to, I suppose, I don't know, it's not self-indulgent. I think it's important because this is very much focused on the kids. And ultimately, isn't that what our job is all about? It is about teaching children, enriching children's lives, giving them those experiences, all the rest of it. But I want to focus back on teachers for a moment. And there was a tweet I saw that said, where is it? I can't find it. And this is a little bit of a controversial one. You shouldn't have to take anyone you have reasonable reservations about. If there's unpaid overtime, you shouldn't have to take anyone, no matter how petty the reason. And I just that's a bit of a sort of an extreme one. But I sort of want to know your thoughts on when can teachers say no? When can teachers put their foot down? Because we're talking a lot about, as we should be, kind of in the best way possible, how can we accommodate these kids? How can we make this happen? But of course, the onus is still on teachers, ultimately, to make this happen, to ensure the safeguarding, all the rest of it. At what point do we get to turn around and say no? Because you can only facilitate so much. You can only do so much. You can put everything in place. You can have your staff. You can have your this. You can have that. If you feel uncomfortable, often as a teacher, you're very rarely, in general, do you feel you can say it out loud? Some schools, again, are better with this than others. But at what point do you, and Nathan, it sounds like you may have actually done this and actually stepped away from trips. But I often, I have had, as much as I love going on these camps and I kind of throw myself into it once I'm there, I've definitely in the past very nearly walked away from trips because I've had such strong reservations. But often I've been talked around when maybe I shouldn't have as well. So, going back to, we've talked a lot about child safety and all the rest of it. What about, I suppose, this kind of, what about me kind of thing?
I think on that one, it comes down, I think, often to if the teacher has got concerns, if they feel that they're in a position where they need to raise them, then I think we definitely need to listen to them. It feels like quite a politician thing to say, but it really is a case-by-case circumstance, I think. The only generalization I can potentially think about is if a student is in a class, but they're having issues with that teacher, and there is outside support to try to make that relationship work. So if there are other teachers popping in, if that student has maybe, gone out to somebody else's lesson for a bit just to give the teacher and that student a bit of breathing time, then that feels like a fair situation where that teacher says, actually, I'm not comfortable with having them in my group on this trip because of X, Y, Z. If there's been a breakdown in a relationship, in the school building, then obviously that increases the risk on the trip out. I think it's also potentially an opportunity or an area that sort of senior leaders can stand up and help out. So if a student is allowed on a trip, but maybe they have a poor relationship with a member of staff or a few members of staff, can they buddy along with the middle leader, with the pastoral lead, with the senior leader? I know that when I've been on trips previously where we've taken a cohort out and we've maybe had 2 members of staff for every 15 kids, whatever it would have been, I've always gone with the group that has should we say, the more challenging characters, because I knew as, assistant head of maths or assistant head of Key Stage 3, that was my opportunity to sort of step up and help out a colleague who maybe they struggled with a student or a couple of students in their class. So taking them out of their group, having them with me, meant that teacher had a bit of an easier time. They enjoyed it more, their kids enjoyed it more. And then I had no issues with the kids who were in my group because it was a bit of a change of scenery for them. They weren't having to go with the teacher who they maybe had a disagreement with or falling out with. So I think there are definitely ways around it, but I think we definitely need to allow staff to be open with their concerns and listen to them, because otherwise they're not going to want to go on trips, they're not going to volunteer for things, or if they don't enjoy the trip, that is also going to rub off on the students.
Mm-hmm. Charlotte, just interested to know your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I would majoritively agree. I think in primary it is a bit different, I think, to secondary again, but in general, I always fight for kids to go. There are very, very, very rarely times that I would say that I didn't feel like they were safe. Because even if a situation happens, I know that I have enough adults and I always have a backup plan that I'll be able to deal with it. So, for example, I had a group of Key Stage 2 kids we would take to the park each week, and they were part of a nurture provision, and one boy had a broken wrist at the time, and so obviously there were bits of the part that he couldn't do, but he had picked on this other child and actually started a physical fight, and obviously he's got a broken wrist. I can't use the usual strategies to move him, but we had enough adults there that we were able to deal with the situation, that nobody got badly hurt, and we were able to get them back on the minibus and get back to school. It was manageable, and it's still worth doing the trip because they still learnt from it. We were able to have that reflective conversation once he was regulated, and he learnt from that experience. And he hasn't done it again. So I think I don't think personally I would ever say I wouldn't take a child without a very, very, very good reason. But I can understand that there are staff who will, and they should be able to speak up. And I think when they do that, senior leaders do have to step in, and they do have to say, okay, well, in that case, I will join for this part of the trip, or I will be on call, or whatever it is. Like I said, the residential I went on as a leader, and I was there to support with some of the more challenging behaviour, and it is having a different face there that they're not always with. That definitely does help. I don't think. I think if staff are frequently doing it, there needs to be some training and some conversations around, okay, well, this is what we're going to do to support you to be able to manage it. Because at the end of the day, you don't want senior leaders stepping in all the time to having to manage everything. I think it depends on the culture of the school and the level of training the staff have. I mean, the school I'm at, when I first started there, that would have been the case. The staff would have needed a lot of training. Whereas now they would be able to deal with it themselves. So I think it depends where on the journey the school is at as well.
And I suppose it's about those having those lines of communication open between teachers and senior leaders as well, and ensuring that, because this safety thing is two-way. And Naomi, I know you mentioned that you've dealt with some challenging children. You've maybe felt unsafe in those situations, but I don't know your feelings on the adult safety side of this, because it does factor in.
Yeah, it's really important, and I think it is important that teachers are able to say that. And I guess a lot of what I hear is that teachers feel that the effort that they put in on trips is really undervalued, or that it's not seen as the really highly skilled, enormous amount of time and effort that it requires. And so therefore people can feel like, why should it's already an enormous amount of extra demand on a teacher just at the time when they're at the end of the year, where everyone's tired, we're going to the end, and now I've got to do the trip. And then it's like, well, why should I now take this child who has been difficult all year, for example? But that's, to me, that's an issue of how undervalued teachers' time is, and how the skill set that teachers have isn't as highly valued as it should be in dealing with challenging behaviour, for example. And I think what Charlotte's talking about is a real kind of how can we make it work attitude. Like, what could we do to make it okay? How could we put things in place so this might work? And I think that to do that requires staff to feel that their skill set is valued, and that means that they're also able to say, for example, actually, I don't think I've got the skill set to manage this child. We need to have extra support with this child. But I do think there's just something for me very key about the difference between teachers thinking, how can we make this work, and how can we get this trip to be something that the young people can really learn from, and how can it be okay for us as well at the same time, and that they've got to earn their place on it. Because I think that's problematic.
Absolutely. And I think if schools aren't in a position where they know that they've got staff who are confident in taking the trip and doing it, then let's not promise children a trip that we know that a huge majority of the children we're not going to be able to manage the trip. Because there is zero point in giving them this carrot and then taking it away, because half of them are going to fail.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I suppose setting them up to fail is not what we want here. I mean, we could carry on this conversation for a long time, but I've completely forgotten what I was about to ask as well. I had a point and it's vanished. No, not at all. It clearly wasn't that important, but no, I think that this can-do approach, but it does, it relies on a lot of people to make these things work. And certainly when you're talking about, you've also got to be mindful of what works. And if you know, as you say, that a cohort or a group of children is not going to cope, and you're almost setting yourself up for failure as well, then you have to rethink it. You have to look at it differently. But it does involve conversations. And on that note, I have just remembered what I was going to say. I don't know if any of the teachers listening, but you're not taught how to do school trips. Like, I don't remember any part of teacher training where you kind of got a dummy run on this. I mean, you might have done on placements and on things like that, but it is something that you do just kind of have to figure out, because no one really tells you kind of what to do and how to do it. And I remember kind of, I have to do recce's and risk assessments, and I can kind of do them with not with my eyes shut. That'd be a silly thing to say, because you need to look for risks. But I know how to approach that now. But again, no one taught me how to do that, and I don't know about the rest of you. But it is something, it is a big deal. But there's no one that kind of sort of held your hand. I mean, certainly not from my side of things. Nathan, I don't know if anyone or Charlotte or indeed anybody that has experienced that. Did you get a helping hand, as it were?
Well, I'm happy to share quite an embarrassing story. So on my very first school trips, this is it's sort of my first full year in the classroom. Me and my sort of best friend, who would have been 1 year ahead of me, took out a trip to a science fair. We sort of split the kids into two groups. He took one group off, I took my group off. My group was sort of really on schedule. We went round everything, and we had 10 minutes spare at the end before we needed to get back on the bus. And the students have been absolutely perfect all day. They've been fantastic. They've engaged in everything. They've done everything I'd asked. They were absolutely wonderful. We had an amazing day, and they really wanted to go to Starbucks because it's a hot day. They wanted to go and get themselves a cooler or whatever it is they have at Starbucks. To which I relented, because they'd got everything sorted really quickly. They got through the queues, and then they'd done everything. And then the Starbucks queue was incredibly long. It took forever. The other group got back on the bus before us. We then made the bus late, and then that bus ended up being late back to school and for its next school pickup. So that just really shows how we can try and do a good thing, and with a lack of experience, things can actually start to go wrong. So yeah, a little bit of support, or maybe having been on more trips before that trip I led, would have probably been helpful. I wouldn't have got myself into that situation.
I mean, I think we could do a whole show on trip disasters. I think there was one, a Teacher Talk Radio show a while back that did actually talk about. I can't remember who did it, but it's. I mean, I'm sure we could have multiple shows on this, because I mean, I wish we had time to kind of go through the sort of the comedic side, because there is a lighthearted side to this. And on that note, I suppose because I've just seen that Catherine is actually over on Podbean getting started, and so I'm very keen to send some of you over to to listen to her, even though we could carry on this conversation, and I'm sure we'll see more about it on X and Twitter, and hopefully people being a bit kinder to each other. But just in closing, I mean, in terms of kind of moving this forward, and sort of on a positive note, I mean, Naomi, coming to you first, how do you feel that we can kind of manage this a bit better, and what would be your sort of advice, if you like, going forward for teachers and staff facing into these trips coming up in the next few weeks?
Lucy, I am very wary of giving teachers any advice. I try very hard not to do that because
advice is the wrong word. I don't know how to phrase it now.
I think it's
dropped you in a hole, Naomi.
It's really important to be really clear about about trips, and personally, I think if it can be moved away from them being about rewards and punishment, much better. If we could think about these are an amazing, enriching experience for lots of young people, how can we make it happen for as many of them as possible, knowing that obviously there are reasons why it won't always happen for all of them. But if staff are able to go in there with the attitude of how can we make this happen, because it's a really valuable experience for them. And I tell you, I hear that all the time. Like when I talk to families for whom things are tough, I will sometimes hear, that they managed to get him on this trip and it was really great. It was the one thing he really remembered, and he really felt part of the group. They can be highlights for young people who are really struggling, even if the year has been really tough.
Fantastic. And Nathan, coming to you, your closing thoughts on this for the moment. I appreciate that there's definitely lots more to be said, but just from where you're at the end of this conversation.
So I think I really want to focus on what we're in agreement on, because it's been such a hostile debate on Twitter, not between me and Naomi, but lots of other people. So I think it's great to conclude on what we agree with. And I think having an academic aspect to trips, having a learning aspect to trips, rather than just being rewards or fun. Actually, learning is fun. Going to a museum is fun. It doesn't need to be a water park. So, if we're focusing on that sort of thing, where we can make it suitable for all students will be beneficial, especially where we need to consider SEM requirements and how we can, work with staffing, how we can get the appropriate staff with those students. I still will reiterate that there are going to be circumstances in which students cannot go on a trip, whether it's a safety risk, concerns from staff, or behaviours displayed within the school building. But where students are deemed that they can go, we should make sure that we can accommodate as many as possible. And at the end of the day, students will remember trips. We all remember going on trips. Some of my best memories from school are going on trips. I can recall those days extremely well, but I can't recall the random Mondays of 5 lessons. So trips are incredibly important. They're incredibly powerful. I, truly believe in that, having organised so many myself. I don't think we can just say all students go regardless. The more that can go, the better where appropriate. And yeah.
Fantastic. And Charlotte, seeing as you have contributed so beautifully this evening, your final thoughts on this conversation?
I'm thinking that the transition between year 6 and secondary probably needs to be enhanced a bit. If that is going to be the expectation moving forward for secondary schools, maybe secondary schools and primary schools need to work together a bit to make it not so vast for the kids. And I think when planning trips and communicating them with children, just putting ourselves in their shoes and thinking about it with empathy. If somebody was to do this to me, how would I feel? And if that has to be the decision, then what way can we do it in the best way possible? Is there an activity at school that they can do still meets a similar learning goal that is going to be engaging and enriching? So it's not a punishment. It's purely, this is the best thing for you. Fantastic.
Well, I think we're going to have to leave it there for the moment, even though I could carry on with all of you. I want to enormously thank, and that was not grammatically sound, I would like to give enormous thanks to Nathan and Naomi first off, and for Charlotte for joining in the conversation this evening. Thank you to all of you who have listened in. There are many, many tweets and things that I didn't get through, but I am going to go away and read now. Please be, and I know it sounds naff, but please be kind to each other. And when you are engaging in debate, as we have shown this evening, it can be done in a very professional and very interesting way. And I think we are living proof, certainly over at Teachers Talk Radio, that this can be done. And so I hope that we've restored your faith a little bit in sort of EduX or EduTwitter, if nothing else. But I think it's been a very interesting conversation, a fantastic conversation. I wish you all a fantastic rest of the week, and I will talk to you all very soon, because there are some other very interesting chats I want to have, particularly regarding parent WhatsApp groups, which I've had some negative experiences with recently, and so I think there is much to be said on that, and I know that other people have shared some experiences with that too, so one to look out for maybe in a couple of weeks' time. But yes, a brilliant show this evening, so I really appreciate every effort that's gone into it. Thank you, Hannah, who has been behind the scenes. Thank you, Nathan Ginn, for also sharing his insights as well. I forgot to say thank you to you earlier. Sorry, Nathan too. I am not ignoring you. But great stuff, everybody. Thank you so much. Have a lovely rest of the week. Yep, and be kind. And that's all from me.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.